Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, non-death metal YouTuber, if you want to be specific about what you'd maybe expect from my schedule had you not listened to some of the context I gave in that last video, because we are starting on something that I've never quite really done before. We're starting in a long retrospective discography review. Now, of course, I've reviewed discographies in the past, Deftones, for example, but no discography that really had a massive amount of material that had really every nook and cranny worth discovering. And I'll reference Deftones again. Back when I did review Deftones, they had sort of a rarities covers sort of album they had going there, which unfortunately has actually achieved some relevancy with their Smiths cover. And so, I guess I did miss something back then. Maybe I'll cover that at some point, sometime. But today we're going to begin a long journey. Sponsored, not really, but forwarded by our good friend Jen. Once again, Jen made another thumbnail for me, or another bunch of thumbnails. As you'll see the thumbnail of this video, that is Jen's beautiful smile right there. And Jen made that thumbnail, an imitation of the Filth album by none other than 1980s New York no-wave band, or 1990s post-rock band, or 2000s hiatus, 2010s extreme post-rock totalism band, or 2020s band that is kind of similar, Swans. Now, Swans is a band that has gone through an extreme amount of changes. They've been fronted by Michael Gira, which is really the only true constant. They've been a band that has been sort of revolving members, not as much as they've been updating new ones, but they've updated them and then started rotating them amongst themselves. This band does have a lot of similarities with Michael Gira's 2000s project, his hiatus of Swans at the time, Angels of Light, which a lot of those members are currently in the band. And I decided to review this discography because I actually just saw Swans in Atlanta, and I was listening to some of their music before then. I didn't get far enough to really recognize what was going on. I've also owned a couple Swans albums. I got the Seer on vinyl. I got Deliquescence, the live album, on CD. I just purchased Glowing Man on CD. I've got Soundtracks for the Blind on CD. You could say I'm a fan, but beginning with them is truly a difficult thing. So how about we just begin where they began, with the Swans EP. Now, the only member of the band in this incarnation that you're going to recognize is probably Michael Gira himself, the founding member, the permanent member. And at this point in time, they're a four-person band with Michael Gira on bass guitar and vocals. He will be on bass guitar for a few albums going forward, but you've also got a saxophone player on this album. He won't be there very long. This album also doesn't include Norman Westberg on guitar. He will be there for a long time after this one. I believe he's on every single album up until The Beggar, including their live material, pretty much up until The Beggar as well. Now, even approaching this logically, because it's a band that has literally spanned 41, give or take, years at this point, they have not slowed down, and they are not a band like, I don't know, name almost any other band that has gone even half that long, where they started to run out of steam. Swans has not run out of steam. In fact, they picked up steam probably 10 years into their career, you could argue. That being said, with today's material that we'll be reviewing, their first two albums and first two EPs, you'll notice they started pretty strong as well, just very different. And of course, Swans EP from 1982 was a totally different beast. It fit a little more squarely in the New York no-wave scene, as some of you might know, and being on the noisy side, they actually featured one Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth for apparently the first 2 weeks of this band's existence, and Swans was known for actually ending Sonic Youth shows. Sonic Youth would not headline, or I guess they would headline, but they wouldn't close out the show. This would be done by Swans for one very huge, scary, dominating reason, and it's the fact that they were huge, dominating, and scary. And as someone who just saw them live, they still are. Of course, it's in a different way. Now they're a lot more conceptual and broad, and a lot less in your face and direct and harrowing directly. But first, we start with something more on the root of no wave, with tinges of industrial, with a really bizarre array of sounds, something that is a bit more rock adjacent. Now, this isn't Michael Gira's first release. He was in a different band before this one that I won't be covering. Here you get a cross between the true no-wave sound and the real crushing dirges Swans would be known for the next 7 years, roughly. And it begins with the song Laugh, which, if you think Swans might take a while to sound gross, you're wrong, because they are instantly just filthy sounding. No pun intended. The way the recording of the sound is, which is, in terms of instruments, pretty minimalist, very bare bones guitar, very simple percussive bass, a squonking saxophone, and a pretty simple repetitive drum set, you get so much detailed texture. You get that extra boost of no-wave reverb that just elongates every element here. So you can just taste every gross element. Down to the microbes of this thing, you can feel that it's just coated in bacteria. And you get this super minimalist, almost atonal guitar riff that is just fighting against this saxophone while the bass and the drums are keeping the tempo. It's just clanging and hitting itself. It's self-harm in musical form. And especially for this band's scene and year, it sounds shockingly well produced. You hear almost like 100 super clean instrumentals. I'm sure in the mix they had tons and tons and tons of recordings that they all laid on top of each other, but all just arrayed in a way where you could hear the details of almost all of them. And as Swans would be for the next 7 years, there are serious themes of isolation, especially in New York. It is about a man who is laughing as he dies in the middle of the street. And this crazy bass texture has a really warped and horrifying sense of groove to it, which is something that they Swans would kind of forego for the next couple of albums. But here, it's super cool and super unique. And next we are treated to the song known as Speak. It is very slow building, just as claustrophobic as anything. And in terms of a hook, they're as dissonant as they come. It's just worms in your ear like a hook in the cheek of a fish. It turns from this neglectful sense of self-hatred to something that sounds like legitimate abuse, which are themes that are all over Swans' discography even today. The bass is even more repetitive than before, and it sounds completely unholy. The last 40 seconds are just claustrophobic and maddening, truly an insane piece of music. And next we get the track known as Take Advantage. This is a song that is highly, highly, highly indicative of not even Swans that would come in the next few years, but something way later, potentially even in the 90s or even the 2010s. Of course, it has much more of a post-punk energy than what would be going on then, much more tight-knit groove, even though it has one of the most disgusting riffs you'll ever hear, gore grind included, for any of you Carcass fans out there. It's just such a harsh contrast between such a tangible riff and just the gross atmosphere and the really harmful lyrics. I would personally argue that it is the most captivating song on this EP, except for potentially the closer. It's about being an addict, and it's got an interesting contrast between paranoia and also a lax sense of neglect, almost that you're okay with your own suffering. And the minute-long outro is crammed to the brim with noise. It's almost an impressive feat that they were able to get so loud in 1982. And the final song is Sensitive Skin. It is slower and far more lurching, highly indicative of the next two albums, and I would honestly argue it's almost a better version of most of the songs that would come on those next two albums. You get a super cool atmospheric blend of these out-of-sync panned vocals. On both sides of your ears, you are just assaulted with a lethargic and apathetic Michael Gira, whose bassy, groany voice, especially in this case, feels all the more hostile. You get some of the most disgusting lyrics in the entire Swans catalog, and they hit it on their first EP, one of their most unpopular pieces of music. It's about having a woman in someone's basement. If you like Death Pile, you might like this. If you're into power electronics, you might find more enjoyment in this song than I do. But the atmosphere for me is palpable, poignant, and highly disturbing. So it sounds a bit different than their other stuff, but Michael Gira on bass certainly has a really cool locked-in feature of the rhythm section, while the melodic side seems to bounce off itself in a way that's really hostile and active. The guitar is all texture, very little melody, but you're going to see that is exactly the case for the next probably 4 albums. The guitar and saxophone being panned on completely opposite sides is a really fun idea. I would say the B-side is better than the A-side, but the whole thing feels like a New York concept EP. So for any of you Interpol fans, you'll probably agree with me. I'd give this thing a Come to Brazil. Absolutely fantastic EP here. Really interesting. Just not a whole ton of ideas yet. And it's not as much concepts fully realized in a way that has that brutal consistency like you might see on something like Filth. Now, Filth is the debut full-length Swans album from 1983, and instantly it gets a little bit of a ramp up in the oppressive nature of the band. And my hot take about this album, it's not the best album from this era. It's actually probably my least favorite album of these first 4 releases here. But the thing is, it's so influential, it's hard to ignore how interesting it is. And that's far from saying it's bad. It's a very solid piece of music here. It's just, I mean, I'll get to the next bits of music in this video. So it all begins with the track known as Stay Here, which is this trudging, more industrial tinged version of Swans, and a bit more repetitive as well. Half of the technicality of this band is out the window. You get these really crazy textured tremolo riff from the beloved Norman Westberg. Injera is absolutely yelling on this track. Totally maddening sound. And his bass groove only gets less groovy, more chunky, and more abrasive as it goes along. And you get sort of an atmosphere here that is less actively disturbing and more of a blanket of oppression on this album, which ties in a lot to the themes of actual oppression that early Swans would really talk about. The Flex Your Muscles lyric is an absolutely legendary line. I would say the song runs a little bit long, but that's maybe from a more active listening experience. If you're probably paying a little less attention, the completely surging quality of this track will probably be completely captivating. And this goes into the song Big Strong Boss, which reminds me a lot of the EP's qualities, but it's similarly groovy, but it is a bit more industrial, hellish, even claustrophobic, reverb just crammed. And if there's anything I could say that has a little more character about this track here, it's the guitar melody. Norman Westberg really adds a lot of character as the riff seems to ascend in an almost like grotesquely melodic way. It feels like it is seeping down the walls upside down, like a creature of some sort. And this goes into a song, Blackout, one of the highlights off the album. It is certainly a little bit groovy, but it is more lurching and off-kilter than anything we've had in the discography so far. It has more energy and percussiveness. It is about drinking yourself until you black out. In terms of this songwriting formula with a very consistent theme, it might be the best example. And this goes into the track known as Power for Power. There is a lot more bass here, and the tempo certainly picks up a bit, and it has a lurching sort of stop-start quality, and it's almost singing as Jira's voice sways between screaming and a more subdued style. And as the song goes on, the texture that gets most manipulated is the snare. It gets more and more thunderous. It's almost like it was completely omitted until it starts cracking through the entire mix. And the reverb that just swamps through coats the whole thing. It's not like the Swans EP anymore where things are panned so specifically. Everything feels like it is everywhere. Next, you get the song Freak. You get these really interesting, almost glitchy style tape effects that add a lot of character. And it's fast and rumbling until this spoken word comes out over the top. And it's actually about the case of the assault of a woman, which is really, really unsettling. It starts and stops and even develops a swank beat, like a punk swank beat, which I guess gives some homage to the sort of punk nature of the scene at the time. But it feels almost like introspective with its own style of disgust. You're going to see in the Swans discography a lot of times there are concepts about self-hatred and deserved harm. And this goes in the track Right Wrong, which is so cool just lyrically in terms of its concept. It is most indicative of late Swans, not just later, with how much empty, negative space there is in this mix. There is a single distorted groove with tons of energy. It is about rejecting moralism and relying only on your primal instincts. It's might makes right. It's honestly a really scary idea for a song. And that is one thing about Filth that I do really like, is that the concepts of all these songs, as much as they all kind of sort of paint a very vivid and wide picture of Michael Gira's life, the wide really needs to be emphasized, because it's not just one thing or two things. That is something you will see on something like Cop or the Young God EP. It's not a whole lot of conceptual length or width. It's all very, very consistent, which in some ways will come to its benefit. Here, you could argue that it gets a little lost. The Filth kind of describes a broad filth of New York, Michael Gira's life, which is marred with some hardship and tragedy, but it is hard to pin down to something of blame. But if you could say anything, it almost feels like Michael Gira is blaming himself. And next is the song Thank You. It is low, rumbling, and uncomfortably droning. This is a mix that is absolutely claustrophobic because of the bass and the toms given so much volume. Not just in terms of sound volume, but in terms of space volume. It is the volume of the mix is submerged in bass. The EQ is shattered, but it works in a way that is very hypnotizing. It's actually a really cool effect that the album doesn't really engage as much in. And this goes into probably my favorite song on the whole album, Weakling, with the best lyric of the early Swans discography, This Isn't Real, which after such a pretty powerful experience beforehand, that's really not a lyric you even want to hear. It's similar to the tracks on the A side, but it sucks you in. The atmosphere is perfect. The drums are extra weird and cacophonous. The song grows in noise, and the vocals are more manic than tortured. It almost feels like genuinely asking desperate questions. It is completely crazy and so real. Or even unreal, hopefully. I hope a society. It is crazy. It sounds completely awesome and unreal. And this leads us into the closing track of the album, Gang. It has everything falling over itself in the mix. It feels like an eruption. It is completely horrifying. It is noise, claustrophobia at its peak. And even though you could say this is indicative of everything else on the album, it has one feature that these other songs don't really have. It goes and goes until it stops. And then it pauses. And then it goes again. And just, that is one element you could criticize all early Swans for having, lack of dynamics. And here's your one moment of dynamics, complete silence and tape hiss as it revs up again. This is not an album you really want to digest traditionally, as the best experience for it is to digest it vicariously. It is a soundtrack to New York that is harrowing and disgusting, full of self-hatred, and there is zero pity for anything. It is the New York version of the sludge metal mentality, having a ruined life with half-baked political opinions in your lyrics that reveal far more about yourself than anything else. And it is, I don't know if beautiful is the right word, but it works really well. It is a horrible descent, but it is certainly exciting. Now, I do like to review things consciously, so take this a little bit with a grain of salt. I give this one a Holy Roman Empire. I think it's a very solid album. It's very classic, but if you want the classic experience that a lot of people have this thing, it is much better to have it, taking a walk, listening to on vinyl, and doing something else. Ideally not reading the lyrics. But this takes us into 1984's Cop, which take things just one step further. If you wanted a critique of modern society, here it is. It begins with the track Half-Life. An ever so slightly melodic take on the Filth formula really sucks you in for a really cool opener. It's got a really cool juxtaposition between ambition and nihilism, which is really interesting and almost takes it a step further than what we had on Filth. You have a very filthy, sludgy riff, actually. It makes for a much more approachable track than pretty much all of Filth, but more importantly, the rest of this album. It makes the descent far more impactful. And this goes into the track Job, which, if you can't tell already, Cop being the name of the album, Job being named one of the tracks, this is a rebellion against modern society, except who knows for what purpose. Maybe it's known to be fleeting, and there's just a desire to be hurt, or maybe some sort of pride in it. There's almost an interesting theme in Michael Gira's lyrics about pretending to have pride, about self-sacrifice, but the real joy is in getting hurt. It has atonal ambient bass with an almost spoken word over the top, warped, horrible ambient. It's about capitalism and the repetition of life reducing you to something without an opinion, without a say, without a life. It's pretty early on the track list to be such a disturbing slog, but it is just heavy chunks of atonal bass and crushing percussion with very little, if any, distinguishing features about both being played out. The rhythm section is rolling and mechanical, and the mechanical aspect of the production of this thing is truly what sets it forward. And this goes into the track Why Hide. It is off-kilter, lurching, and seriously oppressive. It is about a strained relationship, and it has one of my favorite Swans lyrics, "I need you more than I hate myself." A almost universal lyric to any of you who think about your life for more than 2 seconds. Underneath the muck of atonal guitars, which seeps through the mix like mold, absolutely filthy stuff, and shockingly introspective for what it is. And this goes into the track Clay Man, really bringing out the theme of police brutality being treated by cops. It's a song about how a cop would view you as something of clay, something to morph, something that is easy to morph, something that is easy to abuse and do one's will with. You've got this really crazy opening tremolo riff that floats into the background like it never happened once the drums hit. And if the song felt like there was a little too much going on, then you're in luck, as the song breaks down, as the concept of this arrest gives way to this idea that you are something not just that can be manipulated and abused and morphed, but something to be abused, manipulated, and morphed into one's own image, that of a thuggish cop. The parts become more minimal and less. It's literally wearing down the perspective of the song into something lesser. It is sickening. And this goes in the track Your Property. Distinction. Swans has a later track called Why Our Property. This one's different. It is chunky and heavy. It is slightly quicker than any other track on this album. The perspective, like most perspectives on this album, is one of an ironic but severe sense of self-hatred. It is actually so atonal that the mix hurts my ears a little bit, and I'm someone who's put a lot of wear and tear on his ears due to just negligence at live shows. This song is seriously a force to be reckoned with. The vocals completely deteriorate into something ghoulish and deep. Michael Gira starts moaning, and you almost pity the man. And this goes into the song Cop, with one of the most famous lines on the album, "No one beats you like a cop." If you wanted Clayman to be more plodding, even in concept, this is a song for you. It's almost 7 minutes in length. Stupidly heavy despite the crystal clear spoken word lyrics. Something that you probably could not get exactly right live, but the contrast in the studio is amazing. It feels like a black tunnel. And this goes into the track Butcher, which I do like how consistent the concept of this album has been. You know, while it sort of established this idea of deserved harm, it sinks in too deep. And now you can't even consider that theme anymore because you've already given way to harm. So ideas of harm and self-worth contrast with disgusting sexual imagery on this track. And maybe that is warding of a bit of a disclaimer here. I'm not against sexual imagery if it's done well. Here, it's done well, but certainly not for any positive look. So it is full of deep, deep paranoia. but the song is more chord-based and actually a bit more approachable than the rest of the songs in the album. It's a bit like the track Half-Life. It feels like it could have been a second single, but it has more elusive and mysterious qualities about it. It does feel like something that would probably end up on Greed, but a bit more cacophonous, as this album... The differences here are minute, in all honesty. While I could talk about the lyrical themes all day, it is simply a heavy brick. Not a lot of wiggle room here. I can imagine these things live would be just horrifying. And this goes into the closer, Thug. It is the album's last attempt to kill the listener, and the feedback tries its damnedest. I'm using antiquated terminology for this video. That's how you know I mean business. And this song has the coolest lyrical spin on any album that I know, especially one with so much consistency, as it takes all of the themes on the album and turns all of them onto the listener. It says we are all capable of being a thug, like perhaps a cop. As it leads out, it all fades away and drifts off. It is haunting. So Michael Gira vocal performance is a bit more defeated on this album, what makes it all the more crushing. It's like his own music is killing him. It is thematically pretty consistent, but overall this thing is painful. It is a painful listen. Come to Brazil. Easy. I just think that it could have maybe gone one step further. And it does on the Young God EP. All beginning with a song that Swans would actually use further on in their career, I Crawled. It instantly hits absolutely hellishly. The spoken word is completely unsettling as you get the most cacophonous mix that Swans have produced thus far, with the most atonal bass, the most punishing drums. Everything is taken to its logical extreme. Swans is actively ending an era with this EP. But with the stretched out reverb, it feels red hot, like you are in a furnace, yet it feels ghostly and spectral at the same time, the way the wisps of reverb whip against your ears. And the vocals actually ramp up in intensity throughout this track. And now, due to YouTube rule reasons, I will not be naming track number 2, but the second and third words are A Slave, which already is pretty crushing imagery even for Swans. So it's easily the heaviest title in the discography, and just it's on Spotify or whatever streaming service, or even Wikipedia, rate your music, so go have fun. I just will not be having YouTube do some rule shenanigans with me. It is far more rhythmic, with more stops and starts, and it goes into completely warped screaming. Probably Michael Gira's most intense vocal performance to this day. It is as repetitive as it gets, and it turns into this hypnotic dirge. It is completely totally swamping your mind at this point. Like there's not even any distraction. Someone who has focusing issues, I'm just completely locked into the song and the harrowing themes. And the song gradually progresses. It's very slow and actually rather subtle for how loud this EP is. And this goes into the song Young God, which is filled with distant moaning. It sounds just tortured. And as much as I could try to describe the textures on this album, more than I have, but the only way, and as much as I could try to describe the sounds of what's going on more than I already have, I could just say it's pain, but it only gets worse when this track slows down. It manages to decrease its tempo into something you have to sit through for longer. Every single snare hit feels like it is seconds away from the last one, and it is so loud and percussive. However they EQ'd it is a crime against EQing, because it feels like you are getting beat with every snare hit. It feels like the impact of someone's fist against someone's flesh. But this track actually speeds up, which I love the contrast. And this leads into the final song, known as This Is Mine, which thematically is really interesting on this EP because it pulls themes from Cop in sort of contrast with what people kind of think Holy Money and Greed are more about, which while those albums really aren't that much about money at all, it does touch upon them just a little bit. And here it is about capitalism again, but in one of the most interesting takes I've ever heard. It's about how the repetition of life, and particularly capitalist realism, has turned someone into a brute, where they seek power through money, through power. it is very daunting thematically, and it is portrayed rather simplistically lyrically, as it is from the perspective of one of these orcs. I would describe it as an orc working in a factory or a furnace or some giant cog in a machine. It feels very alien texturally. The musical aspects are almost completely gone. And I'm not saying like Einstürze and Neubauten, how they sound musical with mechanical things. They're using musical things to sound mechanical. It is completely dejected and apathetic on the front of the vocals. And they're very blunt. Literally, the song is just about owning an object, just saying, this is mine. And it is a brick of apathy. There are suggestions of implied violence. Just a lot of sickening imagery behind something so simple. This whole EP it just wears you down and delivers the death knell with this final track. Young God is my favorite of the first 4 Swans releases because it is so consistent. While Cop is very consistent, it is not ultimately consistent. And here you get 3 songs that are just mud, trudging through hot, almost boiling mud until a death knell, a hammer hit across the head, where you wake up from being blackout drunk to go to your day job again. It's a come to Brazil. You know, I guess thematically it could be expanded upon a bit more. I'm sure there are some textures that could have been explored here. It's maybe just a little too consistent for me, but what an impact. And there is a live recording of the Filth era stuff on the deluxe edition of Filth on Spotify, as well as some released versions. I have not listened to it, but I've heard it sounds extreme, to say the least. But other than that, I will be ending the video for today. This has been the first part of the Swans series. How do you guys like Swans? Do you like their no wave era? We are about done with the original run of that early no wave material, and it is pretty excellent stuff. It's very, very, very remarkable. Honestly, I totally want to get Young God on an EP and play that in front of all my loved ones at a party of some sort. But what do you guys love about Swans? I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Have you seen them on tour recently? I did. They are incredible. I can't wait to get some more material from them, and I can't wait to review some more, because the next step in their discography is pretty much as interesting and a bit underrated, I would say. But, you know, this thing is awesome. You guys are awesome. I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. Any comments, questions, or concerns, go ahead and put down below. I will read most likely all of them and respond to almost as many. And my social media is in the description as well. Instagram, Twitter, or X, if you will. I don't call it that, not due to any sort of hatred for Elon Musk. I don't love the guy, but I just don't really care. I'm just used to Twitter. But more importantly than that, Discord is in the description. My Discord page, where you guys can go and listen to me talk about Swans, or talk about music, or talk about just about anything I feel like. It is my own Discord after all. And, you know, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day.